No one came for my son's heart surgery. Not a single familiar face sat beside me in that bright hospital waiting room. The clock on the wall struck 6 in the morning. A nurse gently took my son's hand and led him through the large double doors. Within seconds, he disappeared from sight. I sat down alone. Around me, other families hugged each other, whispered prayers, and shared nervous smiles. Husbands held wives. Parents comforted children. Brothers and sisters stood together. And then there was me. Just me. Hour after hour passed. Every time the surgery doors opened, someone else's family stood up. Relief filled the room as loved ones reunited with good news. One by one, they all left. The waiting room slowly became empty. My chair stayed cold. My phone stayed silent. No calls. No messages. No one asking how my son was doing. 3 days later, my phone finally lit up. For a brief moment, my heart jumped. Maybe someone was finally checking on Leo. Maybe my parents wanted to know how the surgery went. Instead, I read the message. Need $5,000 for your sister's wedding dress. Everyone is contributing. Please send your share by Friday. I stared at the screen. No, how is Leo? No, how are you holding up? No, we're sorry we couldn't be there. Just money. Something inside me finally broke. I sent 50 cents. Along with one short message. For the veil. The next morning, my bank called. And that was the beginning of a family storm nobody saw coming. But before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're listening from. And when you've heard my story, tell me honestly, what would you have done in my place? My name is Claire, and for most of my life, I felt invisible. I grew up in a house where love seemed to follow a schedule, and somehow I was never on it. Whenever I brought home perfect grades from school, my mother would barely look up. Don't make a big deal out of it, she'd say. Ava gets upset when she feels compared. Ava was my younger sister. Everything revolved around her. If she was happy, the whole house felt peaceful. If she was upset, everyone rushed to fix it. One afternoon, she lost a necklace she had worn twice. My parents spent hours searching every room, moving furniture, and checking every corner until they found it. A few months later, I lost a science trophy I had worked all year to earn. My mother's response? Stop being dramatic, Claire. It's just a trophy. That was the day I stopped expecting anyone to care about the things that mattered to me. As I got older, I learned that being quiet caused fewer problems. So I stayed quiet. I did the chores. I helped with bills. I fixed things when they broke. I handled responsibilities before anyone asked. Whenever my father forgot a payment, I stepped in. Whenever Ava had another crisis, I helped solve it. I became the dependable one. The reliable one. The daughter everyone counted on. And because I never complained, nobody ever asked if I needed help too. People assumed I was fine. Years later, I got my first stable job at a hospital. I was proud of myself. I thought maybe this time my parents would be proud too. Instead, my mother called and said, "That's wonderful, honey. Maybe now you can help Ava get her business started." Ava hadn't even finished school yet. But somehow my achievement became another opportunity for her. I smiled and said what I always said. Sure. That one word became a habit. Sure. Sure, I'll help. Sure, I'll pay. Sure, I'll handle it. Sure, I'll figure it out. One evening, my parents came over and sat at my kitchen table. Their hands were folded neatly in front of them. The conversation felt serious. We were thinking, Mum began, it would make things easier if we had access to your savings account. Just in case of emergencies. I hesitated. Something about it didn't feel right. Then Dad smiled. You're the responsible one, Claire. We'd never use it unless we absolutely had to. I wanted to trust them. They were my parents. So I signed the papers. I still remember the smell of cooling coffee sitting between us on the table. I remember the silence after they left. And I remember the strange feeling in my chest. At the time, I thought I had given them access to my savings. Looking back, I realize I gave them permission to keep taking from me. After that, emergencies happened often. A broken dishwasher, a vacation deposit, a new car repair, Ava's business expenses, a bridal shower fund. There was always something. Money left my account little by little. Every withdrawal was followed by a text message. You're a lifesaver. Thank you. We appreciate you. The words sounded kind, but they never came with a visit. Never came with a phone call. Never came with real concern. Just expectations wrapped in gratitude. And I kept saying nothing. I kept smiling. I kept helping. Even when it hurt. The last family dinner before Leo's surgery should have told me everything. Ava spent the entire evening talking about her upcoming wedding. Every detail had to be perfect. The flowers. The venue. The music. The dress. My mother looked at her with pride shining in her eyes. "This is going to be the wedding of the year," she said. Everyone laughed. Everyone celebrated. Not one person asked about my son's condition. Not one person asked if I was scared. Not one person asked how Leo was feeling before open-heart surgery. I sat there passing mashed potatoes around the table and pretending not to notice. Pretending not to care. But I cared. I always cared. That night, after everyone left, I sat at my kitchen counter reviewing hospital paperwork. Insurance forms. Medication instructions. Surgery checklists. Emergency contacts. Everything had to be perfect. Leo was asleep on the couch nearby. His small chest rose and fell beneath a blanket. I watched him for a long time. Then my phone buzzed. A message appeared in the family group chat. Ava's final dress fitting is tomorrow. Everyone please send money for the remaining balance. I stared at the message. Then I quietly locked my phone and returned to my paperwork. Because that's what I always did. I showed up. Even when nobody showed up for me. 3 days after Leo's surgery, our home felt strangely quiet. The air purifier hummed softly. The kitchen clock ticked louder than usual. Leo slept on the couch wrapped in a blanket that still carried the scent of the hospital. Every breath he took felt precious. Fragile. I made soup and kept the television volume low so I wouldn't wake him. My phone sat face down on the counter. No missed calls. No messages. No family visits. Everyone knew what we had gone through. Everyone knew the surgery date. Everyone had promised to check in. Nobody did. Then my phone vibrated. 3 short buzzes. I smiled before I even looked. Maybe someone finally remembered. Maybe someone finally cared. I dried my hands and picked it up. The message was from Mom. Need $5,000 for your sister's wedding dress. Everyone is contributing. Please send your share by Friday. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. The words never changed. There was no mention of Leo. No concern. No apology. No love. Only a bill. And at that moment, something inside me finally reached its limit. This version is more emotional, easier to read, and structured like a compelling long-form family drama story for YouTube narration or storytelling content. How is Leo doing? Those 4 simple words never came. Not from my mother. Not from my father. Not from my brother. Not from anyone. Instead, all I got was a number and a deadline. Need $5,000 for Ava's wedding dress. Everyone is contributing by Friday. I stood in the kitchen holding a spoon while a pot of soup slowly cooled on the stove. From the living room, I heard Leo cough softly in his sleep. My heart immediately turned toward him. The message on my phone pulled me in the opposite direction. I didn't answer. I didn't throw the phone across the room either. I simply set it down on the counter and stared at it. The screen slowly dimmed until all I could see was my reflection beneath the kitchen light. For a long time, I just stood there, thinking, remembering, trying to find a reason to excuse them one more time. Later that night, after Leo was asleep, I picked up my phone and scrolled through old family messages. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe proof. Maybe a memory. Maybe one message that showed they cared about me the way they cared about Ava. But the deeper I looked, the more painful the truth became. There were messages about wedding venues. Messages about flower arrangements. Pictures of Ava trying on dresses. Discussions about decorations, guest lists, and honeymoon plans. There were hundreds of messages. Yet somehow almost none of them were about me. No one asking how work was going. No one checking in after difficult days. No one asking about Leo's doctor appointments. For years I had convinced myself that their silence wasn't personal. I told myself they were busy. I told myself they didn't mean any harm. I told myself being overlooked was better than being criticized. But sitting alone in that dark kitchen, I finally understood something. They hadn't forgotten. Forgetting happens by accident. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice. They remembered every detail of Ava's life. They simply chose not to remember mine. The realization settled into my chest like ice. It hurt, but it was also strangely freeing. Because once you finally see the truth, you stop wasting energy trying to rewrite it. I poured the soup into a bowl, placed it on the counter, turned off the kitchen lights. The house fell quiet. Only a faint glow escaped from the hallway where Leo's nightlight shined. I stood there staring into the darkness. And for the first time, I knew something had changed. The next message I sent wouldn't be another apology. It wouldn't be another sacrifice. It would be the end of a pattern that had lasted my entire life. I never replied to my mother's demand for money. Instead, I watched the message fade into darkness as the screen locked itself. Then I turned my phone face down. Like burying something. Like saying goodbye. That night, Leo slept peacefully. It was the first truly restful sleep he'd had since the surgery. The house was silent. Not comforting silent. Thinking silent. The kind of silence that finally gives you room to hear your own thoughts. I sat at the kitchen table beneath a single lamp. Stacks of paperwork surrounded me. Hospital bills. Insurance statements. Follow-up instructions. Prescription receipts. Every document carefully organized. Every detail handled. Because if I didn't do it, nobody else would. I opened my banking app. The balance appeared on the screen. My emergency savings account. Years of overtime shifts. Years of skipped vacations. Years of saying no to things I wanted so I could be prepared for things I might need. That account represented thousands of sacrifices. And somehow other people had come to think it belonged to them. I stared at the transaction history. One transfer after another. $200. $500. $1,000. Each payment came with a reason. A broken appliance. Unexpected travel costs. Business expenses. Wedding deposits. Every request had been labeled an emergency. But when my son needed heart surgery, suddenly there was no urgency. No concern. No support. I kept scrolling. The numbers told a story I had ignored for years. Not generosity. Dependency. Not family support. Entitlement. Every transfer was another piece of myself handed away because I was afraid of disappointing people. I closed my eyes. Then opened the transfer screen. Amount, 50 cents. 50 cents. The exact amount I felt their concern had earned. In the notes section, I typed, "For the veil." I looked at the words for a moment, then pressed send. A tiny notification sound echoed through the room. Soft. Simple. Final. I set the phone down and took a slow breath. There was no joy. No revenge. No satisfaction. Just peace. The next morning smelled like coffee and toasted bread. Leo sat at the kitchen table drawing rockets on the back of an old envelope. His cheeks were still pale, but his smile had returned. That was enough for me. "Mom?" he asked. "Yes, sweetheart. Can we visit Grandma when I get better?" The question hit harder than he knew. I smiled gently. "Not right now." "Why?" "They are busy getting ready for the wedding." He nodded and returned to his drawing without another question. Children accept things much easier than adults. After he left for a follow-up appointment that afternoon, I opened my laptop. A pale blue login screen appeared. I entered my password, clicked through several menus, then stopped at the page I had been avoiding for years. Account Access Management. The cursor blinked patiently. Waiting. My mother's name appeared first. Linda Whitman. I clicked Remove Access. A confirmation box appeared. I clicked Yes. Then my father's name. Gerald Whitman. Remove Access. Yes. Done. Each click felt strangely light. Like opening windows in a room that had been closed for too long. Next came a new password. Then two-step verification. Then updated security settings. Every step created another layer of protection. Not from strangers. From people who should have respected boundaries in the first place. When the confirmation email arrived, I printed a copy. The printer hummed softly. I folded the paper in half and placed it inside a folder. On the front, I wrote, "Access removed." Then I slid it into my filing cabinet. A small action. A huge change. By midday, the house was filled with ordinary sounds. Keyboard clicks. The refrigerator humming. Pages turning. The quiet noise of a life being rebuilt. At exactly 2:10 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. 3 sharp knocks followed. I knew that knock. Impatient. Heavy. Familiar. Caleb. When I opened the door, my brother stood there with his hands shoved into his jacket pockets. His eyes avoided mine. "Mom's upset," he said. "I'm sure she is." "She says you froze her account." I folded my arms. "It's my account." He frowned. "She says it was family money." I shook my head. "No. Every dollar in that account came from me." "She said you promised." "I promised to help during emergencies." The silence stretched between us. Then I said the words neither of us wanted to hear. Leo's heart surgery was an emergency.
Caleb looked down.
They didn't even come.
His jaw tightened.
You could have told us how serious it was.
I stared directly into his eyes. I did. The truth landed between us. Heavy, uncomfortable, impossible to ignore.
You just didn't want to hear it.
For a moment, an old instinct rose inside me.
The instinct to soften my words.
To explain. To make him feel better. But I didn't.
I was tired of carrying everyone's comfort except my own.
Caleb finally sighed.
Mom said you sent her 50 cents.
I did. His eyebrows lifted. Why? I thought about the empty waiting room, the silent phone, the surgery, the fear, the loneliness. Then I answered.
Because that's exactly what her concern was worth.
For once, he had no response. No argument. No defense. Nothing. He simply looked at me like I was someone he no longer recognized.
Then he turned and walked away. I watched him leave. When the front door closed, I leaned against it and took a deep breath. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't afraid. For the first time in my life, my silence wasn't surrender. It was a boundary. And boundaries, I was learning, can sound a lot like freedom. That evening, I sat beside Leo while he drew another fleet of rockets headed for imaginary planets. The television played quietly with the sound muted. Golden sunlight spilled across the room through the windows. My phone buzzed again and again on the kitchen counter. Unknown numbers. Missed calls. Voicemails. Demands waiting to be heard. But for the first time, I didn't reach for the phone. Instead, I stayed exactly where I belonged. Right beside my son. I opened my email and stared at the newest message in my inbox. The subject line was simple. Asterisk account changes confirmed. Asterisk. My finger hovered over the mouse for a second before I clicked it open. The email was short and professional. All previous account authorizations had been removed. No one besides me could access the account anymore. No exceptions. No shared permissions. No hidden pathways back in. I read the message once. Then again. Then a third time. Not because I doubted what it said. I just wanted to remember how this moment felt. For years, I had been giving away pieces of control without realizing it. Little by little. One favor at a time. One compromise at a time. One guilty yes after another. And now, for the first time in a very long time, everything belonged to me again. My money. My choices. My future. My peace. I printed the email. The printer hummed quietly as the page slid out. I picked it up carefully and placed it inside the folder on my desk. Then I wrote a single word on the tab. Asterisk proof proof that things had changed. Proof that I had finally chosen myself. Proof that some doors are meant to stay closed. That evening, after dinner, I helped Leo get ready for bed. He was still recovering, but every day he looked a little stronger. A little brighter. A little more like himself. He climbed into bed and started telling me a story about astronauts building a city on the moon. Halfway through the sentence, his eyes drifted shut. His small hand remained wrapped around mine. I sat there for several minutes watching him sleep. The soft light from the bedside lamp reflected against the thin scar on his chest. A scar that would always remind us what he survived. What we survived. That scar wasn't something ugly. It was evidence. Evidence of courage. Evidence of endurance. Evidence that some battles are worth fighting no matter how hard they become. Eventually, I kissed his forehead and quietly left the room. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window. Across the street, lights glowed inside other houses. I could see silhouettes moving through curtains. Families eating dinner. Children laughing. People living ordinary lives. Years ago, watching scenes like that would have hurt. I would have wondered why I always felt like an outsider. Why I never seemed to belong anywhere. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't being left out. I had stepped away. There is a difference. One feels like rejection. The other feels like freedom. Before going to bed, I opened the filing cabinet one last time. Inside sat several folders. Bank confirmations. Account records. Security updates. Printed emails. Every document neatly organized. Not evidence of revenge. Evidence of repair. I closed the drawer, turned off the lamp, and let the silence stay exactly where it was. For once, the silence belonged to me. The next morning arrived wrapped in gray clouds. Soft light slipped through the blinds and painted pale stripes across the kitchen floor. The refrigerator hummed quietly. The coffee maker gurgled.
Leo was still asleep.
I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood near the counter, enjoying the rare calm.
Then my phone rang.
Once.
Twice.
Then it stopped. A few seconds later, it rang again.
Unknown number.
Normally, I would have ignored it.
This time, I answered. Hello. A calm male voice responded. Ms. Whitman? My name is Ethan Cole.
I'm calling from Pacific Union Bank.
I immediately knew what this was about. I said nothing.
Your mother is currently here at one of our branches, he continued carefully. She's having difficulty accessing an account she says belongs to both of you.
I stared at a small crack running along the kitchen wall. My voice remained steady.
There is no joint account.
A brief silence followed.
According to our records, he said politely, she was previously listed as an authorized user.
I replied.
That access has been removed.
Another pause. Longer this time.
She believes the funds belong to the family.
I almost laughed. Not because it was funny.
Because it was predictable.
The money belongs to me, I said.
Every deposit came from my salary. Every dollar was earned by me.
I understand. In the background, I could hear voices. Muffled at first. Then louder. My mother's voice rose above the others. Sharp. Angry. Panicked.
Tell her she can't do this. Tell her that's our money. Tell her she's stealing from her own family. Mr. Cole waited patiently before speaking again. Would you like me to explain our policies to her? Yes.
Then I added one more thing.
And please make note of this conversation for your records.
The banker paused.
I think he realized this wasn't really about money anymore.
This was about boundaries. About ownership. About years of expectations finally meeting a wall.
Of course, Ms. Whitman.
The line disconnected. I placed the phone on the counter. The kitchen suddenly felt very quiet. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. One tick. Then another. For some reason, it sounded like applause. About an hour later, someone started pounding on my front door. The sound echoed through the house. Heavy. Fast. Angry. I already knew who it was. Ava. I waited. The knocking continued. Then came her voice. Claire.
Open the door. I walked over and unlocked it, keeping the security chain in place.
The door opened a few inches. Enough to see her face. She looked furious. Mom is crying, she snapped. I folded my arms.
You skipped my son's heart surgery.
She blinked.
What does that have to do with this? Everything.
For a second she looked away. Then her expression hardened.
That's not fair.
I almost smiled. No, I said quietly.
It isn't.
She stepped closer.
The chain lock stopped her. You embarrassed Mom.
I shook my head. No.
I removed her access.
Those aren't the same thing. Her eyes drifted past me. She noticed the folders on my dining table. The organized paperwork. The labels. The records.
The evidence. For the first time, she looked uncertain. As if she was seeing someone she didn't recognize.
Someone who no longer needed permission. You're tearing this family apart, she whispered. I met her gaze. My voice never wavered. No.
I'm simply refusing to pay for it anymore. The words hung between us.
Heavy.
Undeniable.
Ava didn't argue. She didn't scream. She didn't slam the door. She simply turned around and left. And somehow, the quiet that followed felt louder than any fight. By noon, the phone calls became less frequent. By 2 o'clock, they stopped completely. No more messages. No more demands. No more guilt. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Outside, life continued as normal. Cars moved through intersections. People crossed streets. Dogs chased balls in nearby yards. No one knew a war had ended inside my kitchen. No one knew years of pressure had finally broken apart. And honestly, that was fine. Not every victory needs an audience.
Later that evening, another email arrived from the bank.
The audit was complete.
All outside access had been permanently removed. Additional security protections had been added.
Everything was finalized.
Everything was official.
I downloaded the document, printed another copy,
and added it to the folder. The printer made its familiar humming sound.
Steady, certain, final.
A few minutes later, I heard small footsteps. Leo shuffled into the kitchen wearing wrinkled pajamas.
His hair stuck up in every direction. He rubbed his eyes.
Mom. Yes, Sweetheart. Can we make pancakes tomorrow?
The question was so ordinary, so simple, and somehow it meant everything. I smiled.
Absolutely.
His face lit up.
Then he turned around and headed back toward his room.
Just like that. No drama. No demands. No conditions. Just love.
The kind that asks for very little and gives everything. When the house finally became quiet again, it felt different.
Not empty. Not lonely. Safe.
I placed the final document inside the folder marked *** proof ***,
locked the drawer, and sat alone at the table.
Outside, darkness slowly covered the neighborhood. The last traces of sunlight disappeared. Thin shadows stretched across the room.
My phone rested on the counter. Silent. Still.
For years, that silence would have scared me. Now it felt like peace.
I closed my eyes.
And for the first time in a very long time, there was nothing left to explain.
Nothing left to defend. Nothing left to prove. Only quiet.
And finally, that quiet felt like home.
The silence stayed. Not the painful silence I had carried for years.
Not the silence that came from waiting for a phone call that never arrived. Not the silence that followed disappointment after disappointment.
This was a different kind of silence. A peaceful one.
The kind that settles into a home after a storm has finally passed. The kind that tells you there's nothing left to chase. Nothing left to prove. Nothing left to fix. For the first time in a very long time, everything had stopped spinning. Life became simple again.
2 months passed.
Then 3.
The days slowly found their rhythm. School drop-offs. Homework at the kitchen table. Grocery shopping on Saturday mornings. Laundry piled on the couch. Movie nights under blankets.
Small ordinary moments that somehow felt extraordinary because we finally had room to enjoy them.
The chaos was gone.
The constant stress was gone. The feeling of being responsible for everyone else's happiness was gone.
And with it came something I hadn't felt in years. Peace.
Leo recovered faster than any of the doctors expected. Every week he seemed stronger,
healthier, more energetic.
The scar on his chest slowly faded from bright red to a soft pink line.
Sometimes he would lift his shirt proudly and say,
"Look, Mom, it's getting smaller."
I always smiled, because that scar told a story, not of weakness,
but survival. A reminder that he had faced something terrifying and made it through.
A reminder that we both had. Our mornings changed too.
The house no longer smelled like hospitals and medication. Instead, it smelled like pancakes, fresh coffee,
toast,
sometimes burned bacon because I got distracted helping Leo with homework. Those ordinary smells became my favorite part of the day. They reminded me that we were moving forward,
that life was returning, slowly, gently, but surely.
I also stopped checking my phone every few minutes.
For years I had been waiting.
Waiting for appreciation. Waiting for concern. Waiting for family members to care as much as I cared. Eventually, I stopped waiting. And once I stopped waiting, something surprising happened. The silence stopped hurting. What once felt lonely began to feel peaceful. What once felt like rejection began to feel like freedom. One evening, just before sunset, the doorbell rang. Leo was building a rocket ship out of cardboard in the living room. I walked to the front door expecting a package. Instead, I found a large envelope resting on the doormat.
No company logo. No return address.
Just my name written across the front. I immediately recognized the handwriting.
My father's. For a moment, I simply stared at it. Then I picked it up and carried it inside. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. As if it contained more than paper. As if it carried years inside it. I sat at the kitchen table and carefully opened it. Inside was a check. $5,000.
The exact amount my mother had demanded for Ava's wedding dress. Folded beneath it was a letter.
Just 1 page. Neatly written. I unfolded it slowly. My hands felt surprisingly calm. Then I began to read. Claire.
Your mother and I have spent the last few months thinking about everything that happened.
The truth is simple. We were wrong. We convinced ourselves that a wedding was important. We convinced ourselves that it deserved everyone's attention. But your son's surgery was the real emergency.
And when you needed us most, we failed you.
Not by accident.
By choice. That is something I have struggled to admit.
We hurt you. We hurt Leo.
And for that, I am deeply sorry.
The enclosed check is not a payment. It cannot erase what happened. It cannot buy forgiveness. It cannot repair the years that came before.
I included it for one reason. To remind myself of the value we forgot.
Not the value of money. The value of you. I do not expect forgiveness.
I only hope you know that I finally understand.
I reached the bottom of the page, then sat there quietly,
reading it again
and again. Not because I doubted the words, because I never thought I would see them.
For years, all I had wanted was acknowledgement.
Someone saying,
"We were wrong."
Someone saying,
"We see what happened."
Someone saying,
"You mattered." The kettle on the stove clicked softly as it cooled. A breeze drifted through the open window. The letter trembled slightly in my hands. Then Leo wandered into the kitchen carrying his favorite blanket.
His hair was messy from playing. His cheeks were pink. He looked at the papers on the table. "Who's that from?" he asked. I smiled.
"Grandpa."
Leo tilted his head.
"What did he say?"
I looked down at the letter, then back at my son.
"He said he's sorry."
Leo thought about that for a moment. Children have a way of seeing things clearly, much more clearly than adults. Finally he asked,
"Does that mean we have to see them now?"
I reached over and squeezed his hand. No. His shoulders relaxed immediately.
"It doesn't." "What does it mean then?" I smiled softly. "It means they are learning."
He nodded, satisfied with the answer,
then returned to his cardboard rocket ship as if the conversation was complete.
And maybe it was. The sun continued sinking outside. Golden light filled the apartment. Everything looked warmer, softer, calmer. I folded the letter carefully, then opened the filing cabinet beside my desk. Inside sat the folder marked proof.
The same folder that held the bank confirmations.
The account records.
The documents that marked the day I finally took my life back. I slipped my father's letter behind those papers, then closed the folder. Because that letter was proof too. Proof that people can change. Proof that accountability matters. Proof that healing sometimes arrives long after the damage is done.
I never cashed the check. I didn't need to. The money was never the point.
The apology mattered more.
The understanding mattered more. The lesson mattered most.
That evening, after Leo fell asleep, I sat by the window. Outside, the city carried on.
Cars passed. Street lights flickered on. People hurried home from work. Ordinary life continued.
And for once, I wasn't carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations.
I wasn't trying to earn love.
I wasn't trying to fix broken relationships alone. I wasn't trying to explain my pain to people determined not to hear it. I was simply sitting in my own home,
at peace. And that peace felt priceless.
For most of my life, I believed peace meant repairing every broken thing.
Every misunderstanding. Every argument. Every relationship. Now I know something different.
Peace is not fixing everyone else. Peace is knowing when to stop breaking yourself to keep others comfortable.
Peace is setting boundaries without guilt. Peace is protecting the people who truly depend on you. Peace is choosing yourself when nobody else will.
And sometimes,
peace sounds exactly like silence. Not an empty silence. Not a lonely silence.
A safe silence.
A healing silence.
A silence that finally feels like home. If this story touched your heart, remember this.
Not every wound needs revenge. Not every betrayal needs a fight.
Some wounds heal the moment you stop carrying them. And sometimes the strongest answer you can give is no answer at all. Because somewhere out there, someone is learning the same lesson I learned. That silence can be the loudest answer in the world. And sometimes, it is also the beginning of freedom.